Shalom, good evening, everybody. It is my pleasure to be here with you, especially when you have such a great weather in Washington, almost like Jerusalem at this time of the year. I am very happy to see so many people coming and showing an interest in my book, and I would like in the next 20 minutes to share with you not what you're going to read in the book, but what's behind the ideas. So first of all, I think we all can agree that what's happening in Israel is important to the people who live in the United States of America. Why? Because we share the same values, the same principles, the same heritage, and the same enemies. And because we are in the Middle East today being attacked, so you have to ask yourself why those people are against the Jewish nation in the Middle East. And they are against Israel not because of the land that we so-called occupied. We are being attacked because of the values that we are working upon them in Israel. And the values are democracy. We are following very carefully the elections here in the United States, and it's getting to be interesting. I have to tell you, in the last week it became more interesting, but we do follow it. And we do love the American people and the American values, sometimes too much. For example, on the Day of Independence in Israel, which is a big celebration in May, you will find people putting the Israeli flag and the American flag. I don't like it. I put on my car only the Israeli flag. But why people do it? Because they do admire the democracy and the values of the American people. But one of my main points in my book, that Israel is not America. Even though we love America, we are not America. And we cannot make mistakes, because if you make a mistake, you pay a price, but you are able to correct it. If Israel makes a mistake, we cannot correct it. And we saw it in the past. And my main point in my book, that Israel must take the decisions according to the interest of Israel, period. We do not have to think or to try to satisfy anyone, even if it means telling to our allies or to the American president or to the EU or to the UN, we do not agree with you. And I will give you two examples. We are all, and I'm going to deal with the issue of Iran, because if I will not do it, it will be the first question. But before Iran, let's speak about Iraq. In the early 80s, Prime Minister Menachem Begin decided to attack the nuclear reactor in Iraq. It wasn't popular here in the US, but we did it. And we were condemned by the US, by the State Department. We were condemned by the UN. But years later, people appreciated that the brave decision that Prime Minister Menachem Begin took in 1981 was for the benefit of the American people. Because when you, the American army, invaded Iraq, you were able to go into Iraq without the risk that Iraq is nuclear. And look, let's go back to 1973, the Yom Kippur War. I'm sure there are some Jewish people in the audience. And for us, the Jewish people, Yom Kippur is the holiest day of the year, where we go to the shul, we pray. 1973, during the Yom Kippur War, that's something I found out, even though I thought I know everything before I wrote the book. But while doing the research, I learned myself a lot. And I found out that in 1973, when the Egyptian and the Syrian armies caught us by surprise, and we were almost in a point that we would have lost the war. And when we lose the war, you know where you can go to the sea. It's not that a war that you fight in Vietnam or Afghanistan. When we lose a war, it means that we're out of the game. And we got to a crucial point in the first day of the war that we were invaded from both fronts. And from here in Washington, the State Department sent a telegram to the embassy, which is not far away from here. And on that telegram, there was a message from Kissinger, Secretary of the State Department, telling us, the Israelis, wait, hold your horses. Do not take action, because Kissinger is going to move on with his diplomatic efforts. And at the time that the telegram was sent from the State Department to the embassy, during Yom Kippur, the Egyptian and Syrian armies were already on their way to destroy the Jewish state. And that is an example of a mistake, because the leader at that time, Prime Minister Golda Meir, she was afraid to take a preemptive attack. She was afraid to call the reserve because she said so. I don't know what will be the reaction in Washington. And back then, Kissinger was very strong. Nixon was going down, he was going up, and she was afraid from his reaction. And because of her approach, we almost lost the war. That is why today, when we deal with the issue of Iran, we have to take the decision which is good for Israel, period. Maybe it will not be popular in the UN for sure. Everything that you say about Israel is not popular. The double standard of the UN that is being sponsored by taxpayers' US money, it's something that maybe one day there will be a committee to look at the decision in the UN. But also it will not be popular here in the US. And only today, Secretary Clinton said a few hours ago that we should not put any red lines to Iran. This is a mistake, because when you deal with the enemies in the Middle East, you don't play according to the rules of Washington, D.C., Jerusalem, or Vienna. It is a different ballgame. It's a different language. And if you want to convince somebody in Iran to stop the nuclear race, you have to take action. And in my book, I write it very directly that it is not enough to talk. We need to take action. And we have seen that there are sanctions, but are not crippling sanctions. And I think what happened last month, and the decision that our friend in Canada took to close the embassy in Tehran, it is a brave decision. We should have done it years ago, because the people in Iran, they look at what's happening here. In 2 weeks' time, Ahmadinejad will be traveling again to the US. He will go to the UN. He will deliver a nice speech. But then he will go back to Iran, and he will continue with the race to build a nuclear bomb. In my book, I speak a lot about Israel, but it affects the well-being of the American people. Because if Iran will become nuclear, it is a threat to you. Maybe we are in the front line, so maybe they will go after us first. But listen to what the people in Iran are saying. They're saying it very clearly. We will wipe out Israel first, the little Satan. Then we want to wipe out the great Satan, the United States of America. And in the masks that are saying it, we will go after the Saturday people, the Jews, but after that we will go after the Sunday people, the Christians. And in my book I try to send you a message. You have to wake up. You know, you have to like to say in here, NIMBY, not in my backyard. And many Americans feel, well, it's not in my backyard, the issue of Iran, Israel, why should we care? So let me tell you something. It is in your backyard. Because if Iran becomes nuclear, it is a threat to the American people. Look at the linkage today between Venezuela and Iran, and Hezbollah and Al-Qaeda. Why they worked? What is the connection between Hezbollah and Iran and Venezuela? Why they work together? Why there is a weekly flight flying from Tehran to Caracas? One thing they have in common: the hatred to the shared values, to the American values, to the Israeli values, to what we represent. So if you will ignore the threat coming from Iran, it will come to the shores of the United States. And tomorrow, we're all going to remember the incident and the terrorist attack of 9/11. And look, Al-Qaeda decided to attack the towers in New York City. They could have done it in the towers of Tel Aviv city. They had the capability, and I can share with you that with all due respect to our intelligence and to our security systems, if Al-Qaeda had wanted to attack the towers in Tel Aviv, the Israeli towers, they would have been able to do it. But they chose to attack here in the US, here in Washington, D.C. Why? Because they wanted to send a message. And for that matter, I hope that the United States of America and whoever will be elected will take a leadership decision and a moral decision. Maybe it's not popular, but it will be a moral decision to stop the nuclear race in Iran today. And I don't know how many of you have followed the WikiLeaks reports and what it was written there, but something very interesting popped up from the report of WikiLeaks. When you go and you look at the writings of the Arab leaders, not Israelis, not Jewish, Arab leaders in the Middle East, they are afraid from Iran becoming nuclear more than us. The people in Saudi Arabia, in Egypt, in Jordan. So for that matter, I think we will have to take action.